The trains ran every night. You could hear them coming from miles away, the whistle cutting through the darkness, the rattle of wheels on tracks. Most people heard a train. I heard a funeral procession. Corporal Martin Hayes, United States Army Medical Corps. I was a combat medic in France and Germany, 1944 to 1945. They assigned me to a casualty clearing station near the front lines, a converted train depot where we'd stabilize the wounded before loading them onto hospital trains heading to the rear. For 8 months, I watched those trains arrive empty and leave full. Watched them carry away what was left of boys who'd been whole just hours before. 25 years later, and I can still hear those wheels on the tracks, still smell the blood and gangrene and fear, still see the faces looking up at me from those stretchers, asking without words if they were going to make it. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, coal country. My father worked the mines until black lung killed him when I was 14. My mother took in laundry to keep us fed. I had 3 younger siblings, 2 brothers, 1 sister. I was supposed to follow my old man into the mines, but I wanted something different, something that didn't involve dying in the dark. Got a job at the local hospital as an orderly when I was 16. Cleaned floors, emptied bedpans, helped move patients. But I watched the nurses and doctors work, asked questions, learned what I could. One of the doctors, Dr. Morrison, took an interest. Let me observe in the emergency room, taught me basic first aid, encouraged me to consider medical training. Then the war came. I was 22, prime draft age. Got my notice in March 1943. Could have tried for a deferment, essential worker, family hardship, but I went. Figured if I was going to war, I'd rather save lives than take them. Told the recruiter I had hospital experience. They made me a medic. Training was at Camp Pickett in Virginia. They taught us combat medicine, how to stop bleeding under fire, how to treat shock, how to evacuate wounded from the battlefield, how to make impossible decisions about who to save and who to leave behind. The instructors were veterans from North Africa and Italy. They didn't sugarcoat it. Most of you won't make it through your first week, one sergeant told us. Medics are targets. The enemy knows if they take you out, everyone else bleeds out. You wear a Red Cross armband, but that just gives them something to aim at. He was right. In my unit, the average life expectancy for a medic in active combat was about 9 days. I shipped out to England in May 1944. Got assigned to the 28th Infantry Division, the Keystone Division. We landed in Normandy in July after the breakout from the beaches. Fought through France, into Belgium, into Germany. I saw the whole thing, from hedgerow to hedgerow combat in Normandy, to the frozen hell of the Battle of the Bulge, to the final push across the Rhine. But most of my war wasn't fought in foxholes or behind machine guns. It was fought in aid stations and field hospitals and on those godforsaken trains. Watching boys I'd patched up get loaded onto rail cars, knowing some of them wouldn't survive the journey, knowing that even if they did, they'd never be whole again. In September 1944, they pulled me from the line and assigned me to Casualty Clearing Station number 7, near Verdun, a converted rail depot that became the junction point for wounded from multiple divisions. We'd receive casualties from battalion aid stations closer to the front, stabilize them, sort them by severity, then load them onto hospital trains that would carry them to base hospitals in Paris or all the way back to England. My commanding officer was Captain William Rhodes, a doctor from Philadelphia. First day, he took me aside. Hayes, you've been in combat. You know what it looks like when men die. That's going to help you here. But this is different. In combat, you patch them up and move on. Here, you're going to live with them. Watch them die slowly. Watch the ones who survive struggle with what they've become. It'll break you if you let it. I can handle it, sir. Everyone says that. Then the trains start running. The first train left that night. 40 rail cars full of wounded. I helped load them. watched them pull away into the darkness. And Captain Rhodes was right. It broke me. The casualty clearing station operated around the clock. Ambulances would arrive from the front, sometimes a steady trickle, sometimes a flood when a major offensive was underway. We'd triage in the receiving area, immediate, delayed, minimal, expectant. Immediate cases went straight to surgery. Delayed cases got stabilized and held until space opened up. Minimal cases, the walking wounded, got patched up and often sent back to their units. Expectant cases. Those were the ones we couldn't save. We'd make them comfortable and wait for them to die. The trains ran on a schedule. Every evening at 1900 hours, an empty hospital train would pull in. We'd have until midnight to load it with every stable patient we had. Then it would pull out, heading west toward Paris, and another empty train would arrive the next evening. Like clockwork, like a factory producing broken men. My job was preparation and loading. I'd assess patients who'd been cleared for transport, make sure they had adequate pain medication for the journey, update their medical tags, then supervise getting them onto the train. The trains had specially converted cars, rows of stretcher racks stacked 4 high, medical equipment, a few seats for walking wounded. Each car could hold 36 stretcher cases or 60 ambulatory patients. The first week, it was just a job, a difficult job, an exhausting job, but a job. Check the patient, update the tag, load the stretcher, next patient, mechanical, efficient. Don't think too much, don't get attached. That worked for about 5 days. Then I met Private First Class Danny Sullivan from Boston. 20 years old. He'd stepped on a mine near Metz, lost both legs below the knee. We'd amputated, cleaned up the stumps, gotten him stable. He was conscious, lucid, not in immediate danger. A good candidate for transport. I came to check on him the evening his train was leaving. He was staring at the ceiling, tears running down his face. "How you doing, Sullivan?" "I had a football scholarship," he said, not answering my question, just stating a fact. "Boston College, full ride. I was going to play halfback." I didn't know what to say. What do you say to that? "I'm sorry. My girl's name is Catherine. We were going to get married after I got back. You think she'll still want me? A cripple?" "I think if she loves you, she won't care about your legs." "I care about my legs." He looked at me. "How am I supposed to live like this? How am I supposed to work, support a family, be a man?" "I don't know, but you're alive. That's something." "Is it?" He turned back to the ceiling. "Sometimes I think the guys who died quick had it easier." We loaded him onto the train that night. Car 7, middle rack. I watched him go, watched the train pull out, taking Danny Sullivan and his shattered dreams away into the darkness. That's when it stopped being just a job. That's when I started seeing them as people instead of casualties. Started learning their names, their stories, their fears. Started caring about what happened to them after they left. And that's when it started tearing me apart. October turned into November. The fighting intensified as we pushed toward Germany. The casualty rates climbed. Some days we'd process 300, 400 wounded. The surgery teams worked until they collapsed. The trains ran 2, sometimes 3 per day. And still we couldn't keep up. The worst cases were the head injuries. Men with pieces of their skull missing, brains exposed, fragments of shrapnel embedded in brain tissue. Some were comatose. Others were conscious but wrong. Personality changes, memory loss, violent outbursts, seizures. We'd stabilize them the best we could and ship them out, knowing most wouldn't live long, and those who did would never be themselves again. There was a sergeant, Robert Kimball from Oregon, tank commander. His Sherman had taken a direct hit from an .88. He'd survived, but shrapnel had entered his skull above the right eye. We operated, removed what fragments we could, but there was extensive brain damage. He woke up 3 days later, and he wasn't Robert Kimball anymore. He couldn't speak, couldn't control the left side of his body, would have violent seizures every few hours. But worse than that, you could see in his eyes that he knew. He understood what had happened to him, understood that the man he'd been was gone, trapped in a broken body with a broken mind, and there was nothing we could do. We loaded him onto a train bound for England, special neurosurgery unit. Maybe they could help him. Probably they couldn't. I watched his stretcher get carried aboard, watched him staring at nothing, and I wanted to scream. The burns were another kind of horror. Men caught in vehicle fires, hit by white phosphorus, caught in building fires during urban combat. They'd come in with third-degree burns covering huge portions of their bodies. Skin charred, flesh exposed. The smell alone would make you gag. We'd cut away dead tissue, cover the wounds, pump them full of fluids and morphine. Most died within a few days. The ones who survived faced years of agony, skin grafts, infections, disfigurement. I remember a kid, Private James Chen from California. His half-track had been hit by a Panzerfaust. He'd been trapped in the burning vehicle. By the time they got him out, 70% of his body was burned. We kept him alive for 6 days, 6 days of screaming, begging for death, morphine that couldn't quite touch the pain. On the 6th day, his kidneys failed. He died 2 hours later. I was relieved. Hated myself for it, but I was relieved. At least his suffering was over. But the trains kept coming, kept carrying away the burned, the maimed, the dying. Every night, that whistle in the darkness. Every night, loading stretchers. Every night, watching faces disappear into the rail cars, wondering who'd make it and who wouldn't. In November, the Battle of Hurtgen Forest started. Worst fighting of the war. Dense forest, German fortifications, artillery that turned the trees into razors. The casualties were catastrophic. For 2 weeks, we were overwhelmed. Wounded were backed up in the receiving area, lying on stretchers in the mud, waiting for surgery that might never come. We triaged and retriaged, moving men from delayed to expectant as their conditions worsened. The trains ran constantly. But there weren't enough trains, never enough trains. I worked 36 hours straight, no sleep, barely any food, just patient after patient after patient, updating tags, checking vitals, making decisions about who could travel and who couldn't. Who lived and who died often came down to whether there was room on the next train. During that stretch, I made a mistake. A kid with internal bleeding, I thought he was stable enough to transport. Tagged him as delayed, got him loaded onto the train. He died 2 hours into the journey. Bled out in a rail car somewhere between Verdun and Paris. The conductor radioed back. 1 DOA in car 3. His name was Thomas McCarthy, 19 years old, from Philadelphia. I'd read his tag wrong, missed the signs of internal hemorrhaging, and he died because of it. I found Captain Rhodes after my shift. "Sir, I need to report." I heard. Car 3. It was my fault. I should have caught it. Should have held him for more observation. Rhodes looked exhausted. "Hayes, we've processed 1,200 casualties in the last 3 days. You've personally assessed and loaded maybe 400 of them. You were working on no sleep, minimal food, under impossible conditions. You're going to make mistakes. That doesn't make him less dead." "No, it doesn't. But beating yourself up doesn't bring him back either. You did your best. That's all any of us can do. But my best hadn't been good enough. Thomas McCarthy was dead because I'd made the wrong call. And I'd have to live with that. The trains kept running. I kept loading them, kept sending boys away, some to recovery, some to a different kind of death. December brought the Battle of the Bulge. The German counteroffensive caught everyone by surprise. Units were getting overrun, surrounded, decimated. The casualties came in waves: frostbite cases, artillery wounds, gunshot wounds, traumatic amputations. And they were different now. You could see it in their eyes. Not just pain, but something deeper: horror, disbelief, the realization that we might actually lose. The trains became our lifeline. We were evacuating not just wounded, but whole units that had been mauled, walking wounded, combat-exhausted soldiers, men on the edge of psychological collapse. The rail cars were packed beyond capacity, stretchers in the aisles, men sitting on floors. Sometimes we'd load 500 men onto a train designed for 300. The Bulge lasted through Christmas. I worked Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. No celebration, no pause. Just the endless stream of wounded. Just the trains. On Christmas night, I helped load a group of POWs, American soldiers who'd been captured during the German advance, then rescued when our forces counterattacked. They'd been prisoners for maybe a week, 1 week, but they looked like concentration camp survivors, starved, beaten, traumatized. They'd been abandoned in a barn when the Germans retreated. 4 of them had frozen to death. One of them, Corporal David Mitchell from Iowa, grabbed my arm as we loaded him. The Germans, they executed prisoners, just lined them up and shot them. I watched them kill my best friend, just shot him in the head and left him in the snow. You're safe now. You're going home. I should be dead too. Should be in that snow with Jimmy. Survivor's guilt. I saw it in so many of them. Men who'd lived when their buddies died and they couldn't understand why. Couldn't accept it. Would rather have died than carry that weight. The trains carried them all away. The wounded and the traumatized and the broken. Into the darkness, toward hospitals that might heal their bodies but couldn't touch what was wrong with their souls. By January, I'd been at the clearing station for 4 months. I'd processed thousands of casualties, watched hundreds die, made dozens of mistakes that haunted me. And I was starting to realize something. I was becoming numb. In the beginning, every wounded soldier affected me. Every death hurt. Every tragedy felt personal. But you can't sustain that. The human mind has limits, so you adapt. You build walls. You stop seeing individuals and start seeing medical cases, stop feeling and start functioning. And it's a survival mechanism, but it's also a kind of death, the death of empathy, the death of the part of you that cares. I caught myself one day in February. A soldier was asking me about his chances. Am I going to make it, Doc? And I almost said, I don't know and I don't care. Almost. Caught myself just in time. But the thought was there. The numbness had gone that deep. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Knew I was losing something essential. Something that made me human. But the trains kept running, and I kept loading them. Because what else could I do? March 1945. We crossed the Rhine. The end was in sight. Everyone knew it. Germany was collapsing. The Nazi regime was falling apart. We were winning. But the casualties didn't stop. Men kept dying right up until the end. Kept bleeding out, kept losing limbs, kept getting shipped out on those trains. The thing that finally broke me wasn't dramatic, wasn't some horrible tragedy or massive casualty event. It was small, mundane, almost trivial. A kid came through, Private First Class Bobby Hernandez from Texas, shrapnel wound to the leg. Not serious. We cleaned it, stitched it up, gave him antibiotics. He'd be fine. Might even return to duty in a few weeks. He was smiling, actually smiling. Hey, Doc, You think they'll send me home for this? Probably not. It's not serious enough. Damn. I was hoping. He grinned. War's almost over anyway, right? Few more weeks and we'll all be going home. And something in me just snapped. I walked out. Middle of my shift, middle of preparing the evening train, I just walked out of the station. Kept walking until I was a mile away, sitting on the side of a dirt road, staring at nothing. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't load one more soldier onto one more train. Couldn't watch one more face disappear into those rail cars. Couldn't make one more assessment about who lived and who died. Couldn't carry one more name in my head. I was done. Empty. Burned out completely. Captain Rhodes found me there an hour later, sat down next to me. Didn't say anything for a long time. I can't go back, I finally said, and I know. I'm sorry. I know we're short-handed. I know people need me. But I can't. Hayes, you've been doing this job for 6 months. Most medics break in 2 months, some in 2 weeks. You've lasted longer than anyone had a right to expect. I'm supposed to be stronger than this. You're not supposed to be anything. You're human. Humans have limits. You've reached yours. What happens now? Now we get you some rest. I'm putting you on medical leave. 2 weeks. You're going to sleep, eat regular meals, and not think about casualties or trains or any of this. And after 2 weeks, we'll see. Maybe you come back. Maybe you don't. Maybe we find you a different assignment. But right now, you need to stop. I spent 2 weeks in a rest facility near Paris. Slept 12 hours a day. Ate real food. Took walks. Didn't think about the war. Didn't think about the trains. But I dreamed about them. Every night I dreamed about loading stretchers, about faces looking up at me, about the sound of wheels on tracks carrying the wounded away into darkness. When I came back, Captain Rhodes reassigned me. No more clearing station. No more trains. I spent the last weeks of the war at a field hospital, doing routine post-operative care. Easy work, safe work. Work that didn't require me to decide who lived and who died. Germany surrendered in May. I went home in July, got my discharge papers, my medals, my separation pay, went back to Pennsylvania, back to the same small town I'd left 2 years earlier. But I wasn't the same person. Couldn't be. I tried to be a medic again. Got a job as an orderly at the same hospital where I'd worked before the war. Dr. Morrison was still there. He was happy to see me, offered me more responsibility, encouraged me to pursue formal medical training. I quit after 3 months. Couldn't handle it. The smell of hospitals, the sight of blood, the sound of people in pain. It all took me back. Back to the clearing station. Back to the trains. I worked construction for a while, physical labor, nothing medical, nothing that reminded me of the war. It helped. Some. I got married in 1947. Good woman, Mary, teacher at the local elementary school. We had 3 kids. I never told her much about the war. Never told anyone. What was there to say? That I'd spent 6 months loading broken boys onto trains. That I'd watched thousands of them suffer and die. That I'd become so numb I'd stopped caring. Who wants to hear that? The nightmares were constant. The sound of train whistles would send me into a panic. I'd hear a train in the distance and I'd be back there at the loading platform, watching the stretchers go into the rail cars, watching the faces, remembering the names. Danny Sullivan, Robert Kimball, James Chen, Thomas McCarthy, David Mitchell, Bobby Hernandez, and hundreds of others, thousands of others. All those names, all those faces burned into my memory. In 1952, I had a breakdown, complete mental collapse. Couldn't work, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. Mary had me admitted to a psychiatric facility. They kept me for 8 weeks, diagnosed me with war neurosis, gave me medication and therapy. It helped, enough to get me functional again. But I was never right, never whole. Part of me was still standing on that platform, watching the trains leave, still carrying the guilt of the ones I couldn't save, still numb from the ones I'd stopped caring about. I avoided train stations, avoided anything that reminded me of the war. But you can't avoid everything. Trains run through the world. And every time I'd hear that whistle, that rattle of wheels on tracks, I'd be 23 years old again, loading casualties in the dark. Mary passed away in 1967. Cancer. I watched her die in a hospital, surrounded by doctors and nurses who couldn't save her. And all I could think was, at least she had a bed. At least she had medicine. At least she didn't die on a train. My kids are grown now. They have their own families. They know their father was in the war, that he was a medic, that he did his duty. They don't know about the nightmares, don't know about the breakdown, don't know that their father is still fighting a war that ended 24 years ago. I'm 47 years old. I live alone in a small house in Pennsylvania. I work part-time at a hardware store. I see my kids on holidays. I live a quiet life. But every night, I hear the trains. The Army gave me a Bronze Star for my service, told me I'd saved lives, made a difference, served with honor. Maybe that's true. I did save some. I know I did. The ones who made it onto those trains and survived, they got to go home, see their families, live out their lives. That matters. But I also failed so many, made mistakes that killed people, became so numb that I stopped seeing them as human beings, sent men to die on trains because there was no room for them in surgery, made impossible choices that haunt me still. Was I a good medic? I don't know. I did my job, followed orders, worked until I broke. That's all. But the cost? Nobody talks about the cost. Not the cost to the wounded, but the cost to those of us who treated them. We gave pieces of ourselves we can never get back. Pieces of our humanity, our empathy, our peace. People think medics are heroes. Maybe some are. I wasn't. I was just a guy who got assigned to a clearing station and spent 6 months loading trains, watching boys suffer, watching them die, watching them disappear into the darkness, heading toward hospitals I'd never see, facing futures I couldn't imagine. The trains ran every night, carried away thousands of wounded soldiers, carried them to safety, to surgery, to recovery, or to death, or to lives so damaged they might have been better off dying. And I stood on that platform night after night, loading them on, doing my duty, following orders, slowly dying inside. 24 years later, the trains are still running, through my dreams, through my memories, through the corridors of my mind where I can't escape them. The whistle cuts through the darkness. The wheels rattle on the tracks. The stretchers load into the rail cars. The faces look up at me, asking without words if they're going to make it. And I still don't have an answer. Most people hear a train and think about travel, adventure, going somewhere new. I hear a train and I think about death, about suffering, about boys who never came home, or came home so broken they wish they hadn't. I hear a funeral procession, a cortege of steel and steam carrying the dead and dying away from the war. The trains ran every night. In my head, they're still running. They'll run until the day I die, and maybe not even then.